I mean, look, we made that decision, Julia. 17.4 million people voted leave, more than have ever voted for anything else. And everyone in the run-up to that campaign made it very clear that that was going to be the final decision. The government spent £9 million on a pamphlet stressing that there wasn't going to be any second vote. But what I think is really interesting here is, let's suppose that Donald Tusk and Jean-Claude Juncker, who said the same thing, really wanted us back. If they really wanted Britain to reconsider its decision, wouldn't they offer the kind of looser deal that David Cameron failed to secure from them during the renegotiation? Of course, in reality, they're absolutely unwilling to contemplate that, which of course explains why it is we're leaving, because there's no way that they'll ever think about giving any power back to the nation.
So you're saying if he really meant it, if the EU really meant it, they would compromise. Is the reality actually that it's all about the money, the huge net contribution we make to the EU, which is going to leave a very big hole in the EU books?
There's an element of that, but I think there is also an element of believing what you want. And remember that they keep on seeing, Tony Blair and Chuka Umunna and Anna Soubry and all these people coming over to tell them that, Britain's on the point of changing its mind and there's no parliamentary majority. And I think they've convinced themselves that somehow, if they make Brexit difficult enough, we'll just give up and drop the whole idea. And the danger of this, and the danger, therefore, of what Tony Blair and Chuka Umunna and so on are doing by constantly questioning the result and demanding another vote, is that and I know that there isn't going to be any change of mood in this country. But when they say, if we get a bad enough deal, maybe the country will think again, they might get the first half of what they want. They might make it a bad deal, but there's no way that they'll actually change people's minds. And therefore, you've just got to wonder whether it is a justifiable thing to go and try and wreck the process. I'm not saying that you shouldn't have a different view about the outcome. That's fine. But a lot of what they're doing is just wrecking.
But you cannot know for sure that people's views won't change. Nigel Farage, the former UKIP leader, of course, that's what cat among the pigeons, didn't he, last week when he talked about the prospect of a second vote not being ruled out. But there are actually quite a lot of difficulties for getting that. I mean, realistically, that can't be done before we actually leave in March 2019, can it?
Just think about this. You'd need, first of all, to get 2/3 of MPs to vote for an early dissolution of Parliament. That's how.
Why would there have to be a dissolution of Parliament to have a second referendum?
Because how are you going to get a second referendum through the existing Parliament when 500 and something MPs voted for Article 50? So you'd need to have a mandate for a different referendum. You'd need to simultaneously persuade most Labour and most Tory MPs that it was in their interest to have a snap referendum. Then the party proposing a second referendum would need to win that election. Remember that all of the parties that tried that last year lost ground. The Greens, the Lib Dems and the SNP, parties that upheld the result, won 85%. Then the party that had reversed its position and won this snap election would need to get the legislation through and win the referendum, when, as you say, there's been no change in public opinion. Then all of the other countries would have to agree to take us back on present terms, in other words, without making us join the euro and the European army and so on, and keeping our rebate. And all of this would need to happen before March of next year. I mean, when you put it like that, you see that it's a total fantasy. So the only result of constantly talking about this thing that isn't going to happen is to encourage the hardliners in Brussels to give us worse terms in the hope that we'll drop the whole thing. And that, I think, you've got to wonder at the motivation of the people doing it.
But in which case, look, it has been something that has buoyed up the Remainers. I think you called them in an article you've written recently, continuity Remain, which makes me chuckle. They have been buoyed up by Nigel Farage's comments, although he's rode back from them somewhat after quite a lot of Brexiteers got pretty angry with him about that. Is it your view that we are just going to trundle on, we're going to get the deal we get, good or bad, and then we're going to leave and then deal with it? Because a lot of people like me, I'm a Brexiteer, Brexit till I die, Daniel, but I'm pretty worried about the government's negotiating ability.
Well, look, I mean, definitely the biggest boost to Remain this year has come from Nigel Farage. I think it was an extraordinary thing that he decided to put himself back in the news at any cost. And he's got what he wanted, which is the publicity, but, a huge damage to the Brexit cause, and he's enormously encouraged all the Remainers by doing it. And the funny thing was, actually, during the campaign, I remember he kept on attacking me publicly for supposedly wanting a second referendum, which is a rather ironic thing now. I mean, I never wanted a second referendum, but I was very amused then to see him turning around and doing it. He even used that as his excuse for refusing to share platforms with me. Oh, Hannan wants a second referendum. So I was chuckling a little bit when I saw him coming out and saying it. But he's got what he wanted, which is to be back in the news again. But in terms of the overall outcome, look, Brexit leaves us outside a failing political project. We're stepping off a conveyor belt that is leading to deeper and deeper integration. And a few years from now, however it pans out, we're going to be better off than if we had stayed on that conveyor belt. The issue is getting the best transition terms for us and for our European neighbours. We want them to succeed as well. And the way of ensuring that that doesn't happen is to keep holding out this fantasy that somehow, if they make the deal bad enough, we're going to drop the whole idea.
Well, you're certainly not going to drop the whole idea. Daniel Hannan, thank you very much indeed for joining.
You didn't frankly have the balls to put country before party.